Amid reports of anti-Jewish incidents at many of those protests, in Washington, the House has passed legislation creating a broader definition of anti-Semitism, and the change is meant to help the Department of Education enforce its anti-discrimination laws. That proposal passed 320 to 91 with bipartisan support. It would codify a formal definition of anti-Semitism in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The language would also broaden the legal definition of anti-Semitism to include targeting Israel. Critics say the change could harm free speech on college campuses. It now heads to the Senate.
What would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU
stands. A free Palestine from the river to the sea. And that we stand with the Palestinian resistance and their heroic and brave action on October 7th. And they said, long live October 7th.
You can have a tribal war going on and both sides can be wrong. Like, that's more common than one side being good, one side being bad. But it's an existential crisis, and it's admitted that George Soros and the State Department are funding it. Headline: George Soros is paying student radicals who are fueling nationwide explosion of Israel-hating protests. It's problem, reaction, solution.
A lot of groups like George Soros's Open Society Foundations and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund are giving donations through something called a fiscal sponsor, which is a nonprofit organization that then disperses funds to other groups. And this is how some of the groups like Students for Justice in Palestine and other groups are getting money. The big funders like the Soros Foundations and the Rockefeller Brothers Foundations are sending money through various different levels of nonprofits, so that when you go back to try to find who is the original donor, you have to do a lot of work.
Famous on-record high-level KGB defector.
When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
Dr. Rachel Ehrenfeld, she's author of the book, The Soros Agenda. She's also the founder and president of the American Center for Democracy and the Economic Warfare Institute.
Well, George Soros has been funding for decades, directly and indirectly, quite a bit of money through the Tides Foundation in San Francisco, pro-Hamas organizations, even affiliated with Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. After October 7, the Soros organization, through Tides and also directly, have been funding groups that organizing the demonstrations now. He has been funding Rashida Tlaib. Actually, is an honorary graduate of Soros grants. There is an organization in San Francisco that he funds, which actually works with high schools throughout the country, not only funding and calling for the demonstrations, but also giving instructions to high school students what to chant and what to yell during the demonstration, and what would be their talking points in order to counter anybody who criticizes Hamas.
Troubled base Philadelphia bank, Republic First Bank, was collapsed and was seized by state regulators. Fulton Bank reached an agreement with regulators to take over Republic's first nearly 36 branches in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. They will reopen under the Fulton Bank name. This branch in Media already has a temporary sign-up. This is the first regional banking failure this year.
And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new accounting is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights.
They're going to bypass the banking system. One of the reasons why they're doing this is because the banks, once again, need to be bailed out. But the feds are going to let the banks swing in the wind, and they're going to go directly to consumer, and you're going to get your money directly from the central bank. They're not going to be bailed out this time. The Fed's going to say, you're out. We're going to go directly to consumer. Here's a CBDC.
Well, the World Economic Forum has finally admitted what we've been saying here on the show. The US dollar is about to change forever. That's right. We knew that CBDCs were rolling out central bank digital currencies, but this week we heard directly from Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum that in fact 98% of central banks are preparing to launch CBDCs. Again, this right from the mouth of the World Economic Forum. After all, this is their plan. They've wanted to take away control of the monetary system, get it out of the hands of individual sovereign governments, individuals, and put it in the hands of Wall Street and larger banks. Now, when you have to understand the central bank structure in the United States, it's controlled by Wall Street. This is the goal, is to allow those big multinationals to control the money supply, get it out of the hands of the U.S. Treasury. Take that power away from Janet Yellen in the U.S. Treasury. Take it away from individual governments. Put it in the hands of a few massively large banks. And this all comes on the same week that we also saw more bank collapses in the United States, more seizures of banks, and massive amounts of U.S. deposits drying up in banks. See how this happens? All of these smaller banks get gobbled up by the big guys. So the J.P. Morgans, you have the Wells Fargos, Bank of America, you have Deutsche Bank, and these few massive large banks control the entire process. So let's go through what the World Economic Forum is saying here, which is startling, but we knew this was coming. So get ready, guys, to have like no cash anymore. Get ready to have a digital ID, a digital wallet that will control everything. Now, I know some of you might be saying, that's fake news. Well, frankly, you don't know what you're talking about. I've been studying and tracking this for a very long time. I point you to my deep dive interviews here with Whitney Webb, who's one of the foremost authorities on tracking all of the structure of these CBDCs. And it's startling. The control is coming, guys. I mean, think about their ability to track everything you're doing through a digital ID on your phone. Okay? They'll be able to watch your carbon footprint. Oh, you've traveled too much this month. So no, you are not allowed to buy gasoline anymore for this month until the calendar resets for the month because you've driven to see grandma too many times, or you've been on the road too much, or you've flown too much, or you've bought too much meat, right? This is the ridiculousness that we're currently facing right now. But they'll be able to track every transaction. And of course, they want everything then tied to the blockchain. This is the tokenization of every asset, farmland, everything in the United States. So they will be controlling everything and watching everything. It is coming. This is the dream. Now, they've already rolled this out in Ukraine. You remember, Ukraine is really a testing ground for a lot of this. They rolled this out using what's known as the DIA app. Okay, DIA was an app that was built by USAID, USAID, and the United States government, and of course with the help of the World Economic Forum, to put this into a test bed process where everything can pay right with your phone in Ukraine, track everything. You can even rat on your neighbors. That's right, built inside the application. This is like 1984 level stuff here, guys. And we don't know how all of this is going to come together, but we do know the goal. The goal is total control. The goal is to get rid of cash. The goal is to make sure that every transaction is monitored and controlled through a central system that is all digital. So the organization that argues that wholesale CBDCs, which are restricted to large transactions between financial institutions, could address banking industry challenges related to interbank payments and securities transactions. So according to the World Economic Forum, they say that CBDCs are poised to improve our cross-border transactions. Of course, that's how they're pitching it, right? That, the amount of time that it takes for wires to happen, and I agree with this. I will agree that the process of sending wires right now is a disaster. It's like 7 or 8 different steps to confirm you're sending a transaction, then it's sending an information back, then it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So cross-border transactions should be dramatically improved. But is this the answer? Where we remove cash and we put it instead in the control of central banks so that we don't have a physical representation of currency anymore. We simply have a digital representation of some sort of an international world currency. The organization, the WEF, acknowledges, however, that the legal and the regulatory elements needed to make widespread CBDCs possible have an unknown time frame. So again, 98% of central banks are preparing to launch this, but you have certain states in the United States which are pushing back against this. I mean, you have Florida, for instance, saying no CBDCs, and you're going to have other countries that are going to say no to this. So I think we're really heading for an interesting moment right now with our monetary policy and entering this next phase. But we've been warning you it's coming. And here we have the World Economic Forum saying 98% are preparing to launch.